Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Human Meat Machine. My name is Patty. I am in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm excited to have my guest on the other side of the country today. We're going to chat about some really interesting topics. But before we get to our guest, let's talk a little bit about the mission of the group. So this meetup was originally called Agile Conversations, and with the impending AI transformation that, of course, is currently underway, we are transitioning our topic to more AI focused. And of course, that is obviously relevant to the Agile community as a lot of us work in software. But the mission of this group is to bring together a diverse community of AI professionals. So both technical and non-technical people. And we want to support everybody as they are moving through their AI journey, whether they're at the beginning or the middle, or, they've kind of given up, but, you know, the time is here, so we can't really stick our head in the sand. I'm very passionate about helping the workforce prepare for this fourth industrial revolution, so the fusion of human and machine together. And of course, this is shaking up the entire world, so we've got to learn how to navigate this together. So I want to bring in guests who are on the front lines, people who are like boots on the ground, working on this change in their organization, and they can help give us some insight into how we navigate this. So if we go to the next slide here, I'm really excited to, and this is hot off the presses, so this is a really jerry-rigged slide up here, but I am really excited to announce the next meetup that I have lined up. This is going to be a panel interview, and we're going to be talking about how do we pivot our career, our Agile career, as the market is shifting and changing. And we'll talk about that today a little bit, but I know there's a lot of people that are concerned with what's going on out there with Scrum and Agile, and are the roles disappearing? Are they not disappearing? But we want to support the community in transitioning to other roles. So I have four exciting guests that are coming. You probably all know them from LinkedIn. They are content creators as well. I've had three of these people as guests on this vidcast before. So welcome back to the three, Anu, Nisha, and Richard, and we're being joined by Dave. These people have pivoted from either Scrum Master or Agile Coach, or in Richard's case, Product Manager, into a new role. And we're going to learn about their journeys, why they are pivoting their career, what's the imperative there, but also how did they do it? Because I recently also pivoted my career and I've been getting these questions. So why not pull a bunch of experts together and help everybody else on this journey? So this was suggested by another member of this meetup. Her name is Donna. So thank you, Donna, for this idea. I reached out to my friends. We're gathering together in just a couple of weeks here, September 23rd. So with that being said, I am going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to get to our interview. All right, so we're all here to talk about Agile, talk about AI, talk about this transition for our community. So let's get started with this. Brad, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Tell us, who you are, where you're located, first of all, what your current role is, and then just very briefly, your career overview.
Yeah, thanks, Patty. So I am Brad Nelson, as it says on the invite. I am currently in my brand new office in the Metro Detroit area. You can still see the boxes back there. So I haven't put up the sound treatments or the lighting or anything yet, but I am the host of the Agile for Agilists podcast. Drew Podwall and myself started that a couple years back. We have 40 episodes now, so definitely enjoyed that, where we speak with industry experts similar to this on all sorts of topics, Agile related. I would say when I started it, my concern was that we'd just talk about Scrum, and we haven't had a single Scrum episode. So it's been pretty fantastic. But that is my moonlight job. So my day job for years, I was an Agile consultant. And that's where I kind of cut my teeth and got my experience. Well, I worked in IT first. I didn't just jump right into consulting, as some people do, but I believe you need to be experienced before you can give advice. But the last, I guess, career job I had was in consulting for years. And 2 years ago, as of last week, I moved in-house. So I kind of transitioned out of, I wouldn't say agile, but consulting because I saw where the industry was going as far as having trouble selling work. Um, so I currently work at Ford Motor Company. 2 year anniversary was last week, I think I mentioned. So I have been a technical program manager there, and I've done multiple things in that role, but still advocating for agility. I do have to say, I talk about Ford a lot. It's one of the reasons why I went there, because I'm a huge fan of process and understanding where things come from. But I do not represent Ford, and anything I say may or may not be things that Ford is doing today.
Always important to say that. I fail to say that all the time, but I don't represent my company that I work for. I represent myself here. So thank you for bringing that up, Brad. So let's jump into Henry Ford. Why are you, I don't want to say obsessed with him, but why are you an SMS? Nobody's an expert, right? We don't want to use that word anymore, but why are you an SMS on Henry Ford? Where does this interest come from? And why does that interest you as an agilist?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I worked for a company called Meyer. They're a grocer. I worked in their headquarters when I was first introduced to this concept of Agile. And then we shortly went into a safe transformation, which felt pretty restrictive from everything I had learned. And so that really kind of initiated my research into where does all this come from and what was the intent when we started doing these things. And what I learned about Scrum, XP, Crystal, RUP, all of those things. But as I kept digging, I learned that everything that we do is really based on the scientific method. And even Scrum talks about empiricism in their training. And so the scientific method was first put to paper by Dr. Shewart and Bell Labs in the 20s. But a lot of things that we do in the best practices actually go back to the Ford assembly line and the initial principles. Many people don't know that Henry Ford worked for Edison and learned how to be a scientist, basically. And he applied science to create the most revolutionary company of the modern century. So that is where the interest comes from, is that all of these things we're doing are really just rebranded. Every 10, 20, 30 years, we rebrand and call it something else. And if you boil it down, we're all doing the same things that enabled Ford to be successful with the Model T.
Yeah. And when we talked, like it was probably a couple of months ago at this point, I mentioned, my parents are, they don't like the word snowbirds. What is that? What is the like the word for a snowbird? That's like offensive to them. Anyway, they
But
moonlight in Florida, and the city that they moonlight in has the Ford slash Edison Museum. So
Mhm.
I went there when I visited them a number of months ago, and we talked about it. So I was excited to learn all of the connections there because I really didn't know. And I know there was like a falling out between all of those folks at some point, but I, it was interesting to me to see how much else he had worked on before he got to the thing he's famous for, which is the assembly line in the
Mhm.
Model T. Um, but I know that, you know, and I think I've said this in some of my social media posts or my email newsletter that he does have a reputation of not being like the nicest person, whatnot.
Mhm.
So you may not like him as a human being, but he did revolutionize manufacturing in the United States. He did bring, or he supported the second industrial revolution here. And even though he, I guess, reduce the working hours, and there was a lot of safety improvements at that point. What did that do for American society?
Yeah, I think it's important to separate the man from the company, but even a lot of these concepts and theories, as you kind of hinted at, um, I also don't know him. I think we tend to, with celebrities in general, we tend to act like we know them. I didn't know him. My interpretation of what I've read and studied about him is that he was really kind of a no-nonsense type person, and all the things that he did were based on his obsession with efficiency, which is funny because a lot of those things contradict some of the things that we see today that we tend to think of as being efficient based off of more of Jack Welch and neoliberalism. But he there are stories of him being very personable in that in his younger years, but I think a lot of the things that he did in order to better the workplace for people wasn't necessarily altruistic. It was common sense. If people are tired, they're going to make more mistakes. And so he didn't create the weekend necessarily, but he popularized the weekend. I see posts occasionally where people are like, "Thanks, Ford, for the 40-hour work week. Like, you've ruined our life." But the reality is, people were working 7 days a week, sun up to sundown. And so, really, he gave us less work time. So it's all kind of how you look at it. He believed in leisure time. So he was big in consumerism, and the whole point of having a business is so that others can buy your products. And if they're working all the time, they can't buy. Right? So it goes back to practicality and not necessarily altruism. And so I think there's so many things that he did that we live in his shadow today, which for right or wrong, better or worse, some we just don't know. Right? Like people worked in farms, and when you had a farm, your own farm, you owned it, you had the equity. He got people to give up that equity to work for him. So now you have leisure time, but you don't necessarily have equity in the business. And you could blame that on some of the disparities we see today between the mega rich and that. So I definitely think there's pros and cons in the way he's shaped our society today.
I know as we are, I guess, looking back, right, we have this view, to your point, we didn't know him. All of us didn't live back 100 years ago. Um, I've written about this recently in the past week or so. With every technological revolution, it seems like humans have this expectation that we're going to have more leisure time and we are going to work less. And I know that there are people out there like Bill Gates and Elon Musk who are saying, we're headed for a 2 or 3 day work week. We're going to have a 5 day weekend. Um, and when you look at history, it never turns out that way. So I'm curious what your thoughts are about that. Are we really headed for that? And if we are not, why are they saying that? And that's a trickier question
Yeah, it
because
is.
you don't know
Yeah.
them either.
I don't know them either. That's correct. There's a lot of similarities between Elon and Henry Ford, that's for sure. Um, so Ford's thing was he was really big in technology, which I think is where we see the similarities again today. He modified machines and he really invested in machinery to reduce the effort for people in the line. AI arguably should be used the same to augment intelligence and to make work easier for us. I believe Henry Ford's vision was that people would work less as machines got better and were able to take more of the burden. I think the thing to remember is that's 120 years later, and we live in a very different society. We live in a Welchian capitalistic country where companies don't have the same moral obligation to the economy that people, even like Rockefeller, had um, way back then. And so, Elon has brought up that we're going to need a universal income, not a minimal one, an actual like income where people just get paid to exist because we're not going to have the same types of jobs. I think if we look at like the levels of society as defined by Michio Kaku, in order to be able to progress as a human race, I do see potentially the need for that, but I don't know, at least in America, given the current climate and our current approach to elevating the rich with this trickle down economics that never seems to trickle down. I don't know, there's a gutter or something that diverts it all. Um, if I'm being completely honest, it doesn't give me a lot of hope that we're going to end up in a 2, 3, or 4 day work week with the same salary that we have today. Um, I also think that there's a lot of, and I'm sure we'll get into this more, there's a lot of disparity between where AI is at today and where it's going to be in the next year or two. I think there's a lot of those doomsayers out there that are like, in a year, trying to remember, I think it's Sam Altman that was like 2 years, we won't have jobs. And it's like, okay, if you say so, Sam. Um, he also said that GPT-5, which just came out, if you keep up with the news, was equivalent of someone with a PhD. And within days, they had to kind of roll it back and patch it because it did not live up to expectations. I think Sam is a marketing man, and I think we need to remember that there's a lot of marketing right now around AI.
Yeah, and that's a great point to bring up because, I am working in a large organization, and as we've talked, like, let me see how I want to phrase this because I'm not here to speak for my company. I think they're doing a really good job. I really, really do, and I mean that sincerely. They are really being very thoughtful about it, but they are a large corporation, and it's not like this is going to be rolled out perfectly tomorrow. I don't even know if it's going to be 3, 5 years. I don't know. But, and with that being said, like I want to shift to Agile because Agile was promised to be this savior that we were going to become more efficient. Everything was going to work so much better, and communication was going to be improved, delivery timelines. I know that's anti-agile, but delivery timelines were going to be met. Like, let's be honest, we work companies that have timelines. Um, Timelines were going to be met. We're not going to have all this rework. We were going to automate testing. How much of that actually manifested, as of today, right? 20 years later. So when I'm sitting here looking at this is what they're selling AI as and what it's going to do, I'm kind of like, haven't we been told this before? And like, why is now different? Because it's never been different. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there was, I'm stealing from someone on LinkedIn I saw a month or two ago, and I forget his name, so I can't credit him. But it is interesting that I felt like there was a revival of Agile is Dead, which tends to happen every so many years. But there was a significant revival around the time that AI was really picking up again. And the thing to remember too is AI and ML has been around for a very long time too. And this gentleman pointed out that if we look at the iterations that AI is going to, like small teams that are pushing out changes constantly, his argument is Agile isn't dead, it's won, which I think is optimistic a little bit, but I really like the quote that any company that's trying to leverage AI right now is in some ways embracing agility because they have to. It's unknown and they're iterating as fast as they can. So I don't think it's gone anywhere. I think it suffered from hype and marketing, just like AI is going through right now. Anything that shows any sort of attention, people are going to market it. And people that don't necessarily have your best interest or even fully understand it are going to suddenly appear as experts in it. And I think that's been the challenge with Agile for a long time because it's more soft skills and it's more of a way of thinking and approaching things than something more tangible that I can just show you. And so I think Agile suffered from that a lot. But the other thing that I think is really important to remember is in a capitalistic society that we live in today, organizations don't necessarily care if the things that they're doing are overly successful. And for any publicly traded company, you're really in two businesses, whatever your product or services you sell and the stock market. 70 some percent of Fortune 500 companies, their stock is owned by investment firms, companies who their whole purpose is to make profit on stocks. Those are the people that elect the board members, and those are the people that choose your CEO. Your CEO chooses their executive team, all with the goal of increasing shareholder profits. And the reason why this is important is anytime there's a hype cycle, they are immediately going to announce that they're investing in that because that makes the stocks go up. Whether they succeed with it or not is ultimately unimportant for that. And so that's where I think, we were seeing people openly marketing like, hey, we're going agile, but they're not really because executives don't want to change. And I think there's a lot of that with AI. We're starting to see the things come out where they're like, oh, we're not really seeing any profits from AI. But a lot of the people at the top are still talking about it because it makes shareholders happy.
Yeah. And that's an interesting way to look at it, right? There's two separate businesses going on. The folks that are doing the work, kind of like us, right? Putting the products out. And then there's the other side of the business, which people like us and like the people in this room don't really ever get access to or understand. And we're just kind of left to interpret things based on what we know. But yeah, that's a really great way to put it. And I never thought of it that way, that it doesn't matter whether it succeeds or not. They have a different goal.
Right.
And it's good to be real about that, right? And let's just be honest here. Um,
Yeah.
but do you think that, granted, the answer may differ based on what size company we're talking about here, but
Mhm.
do you think they're still interested in chasing the efficiency?
I do think so. And, to, I guess, be a little bit less jaded, if we look at the lean startup like Eric Ries and all of these disruptors that we've had today that technology has enabled us to have, they were all essentially using Agile principles and values and practices. And so I think Agile has proven itself as like the go-to approach to create value. And at the end of the day, I think a business is only as effective as the value it creates for its users. And that's why companies like Blockbuster went under. So I do think that behemoths, even the big four, or yeah, even the big four like consultancies, even big tech, like all of them are susceptible to disruption, even though some of them were the disruptors. And I think that companies still want efficiency. I know it's really big in automotive in general. All of the big automotive companies are always pushing for lean, lean manufacturing. How do we make higher quality products with lower costs? And so I do think that there still is a push for that, and I think there always will be. And um, once again, I can't really speak on behalf of Ford, but I do know that Ford employs the most people in the US, even before like this whole tariff thing. Right? And so the CEO Farley has talked about that quite extensively in recent months about their investment in the economy and all that. So I do think there are still companies. Unilever is another really interesting company. I think they're based in the UK, but they own a lot of other companies where, gosh, I don't know, 30 years ago, they elected a CEO that was like, we're not just going to pad the pockets of shareholders. And so their shareholders sold all the stock off, and new shareholders who are interested in a company like that purchased. And through all of the different depressions and regressions, they've stayed ahead because they really invested in their company. And so I definitely think some companies are interested, and I think they should be interested in it still.
Yeah. The last thing about Agile, because I see the because obviously, and I don't know if transformation's a bad word, dirty word, but I'm going to just say it for lack of a better word. Um, there's a lot of similarities that I see between Agile transformation and AI transformation, and there's always talk about change management and resistance. So the people who are being, I don't know, forced, asked, whatever, to use these new tools, and they see them as a threat. Um, so AI tools being kind of put on the American workforce, people are very concerned that they're training their replacements. And I think to Agile, where like Jira, I always bring Jira. Jira was kind of forced on people, right? And people are still resisting it to this day. And this is how many years later. So do you see any parallels between like AI rollout and Jira rollout, just to pick on Jira? And how do we make that experience different? Because human behavior is human behavior. So what can we learn from Agile that can be applied to AI to do it better, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I think about look through the failures with agile transformations in particular, I think it's because we took a waterfall approach to agility. Um, and so like change management, Brosai, Cotter, all of those models are great for rolling out Jira or tools like that where you may not have as much say in the tool. Some right? Like organizations are going to use a tool. I don't have say on whether we use Outlook or Microsoft Office or G Suite. Those are just the reality of businesses, especially as they get bigger. And so those sort of projects rollouts are perfectly fine with a more traditional change management approach. Jason Little has created Lean Change, and that is the approach I tend to try to take when it comes to how do we change people? And really it's the intent behind it. So I think with Agile, treating it like a transformation and you have to do these things, I think that's where we got in trouble is we didn't necessarily reach out to people and say, what are the challenges you're experiencing today? And how can I teach you the Agile mindset, which is just experimentation and learning in order to overcome those challenges? And so that's where we really got it wrong. And bringing it back to AI, we don't really understand the value we're trying to create with AI. And like, I don't necessarily work for a company just so they can make money. And I don't buy products from a company just so they can make more money. And so the argument of, oh, this is just going to make us more efficient doesn't really hit the humanity and emotional buy-in that people are looking for. But the other problem is AI is such a generic like thing to say because it can manifest in multiple ways. It's like saying we need to use the internet. It's like, yeah, we do, but how? Like, what does that look like? What does that mean? And so I think if, especially developers, if you have highly motivated people, as we try to have in Agile, they were already experimenting with AI before companies mandated it. And they were trying to figure out how can I apply this to my job, but just going to someone who maybe isn't like a product manager or a business analyst or an accountant and just saying, you need to use AI. It's like, cool, how? Like how does that apply to my job and where do I use it? And so this is, I think, where we're stumbling over it. And the same thing we do with Agile, right? You need to be Agile. Well, why and how and where? And like, so it's kind of, I don't know, silly. I just have to laugh.
No, and there are a couple of folks in the comment section that are saying like we need to use the internet. Yeah, that is an excellent point. This is why I love having chats with you because you see things from such an amazing perspective. Like I never thought of it that way, but yeah, AI is a very generic term. Um, Agents, very generic term. What does that even mean? Um, so I love that. And I know there was another comment in there about like, are employees open about their AI use or are they hiding it? And I think it depends on I said, the standard Agile coach answer, psychological safety. I think it depends on what kind of organization you work for and are the leaders encouraging you to do this or not. But employ kind of like we talk about like gaming the metrics and tell me how I'm going to be measured and I'll tell you how I'll behave. I mean, if you're going to forbid employees from doing it, they're going to do it anyway. And they're going to do it on their personal laptop right next to their work laptop. So like let's be real about it. That's the way I always look at things, but not everybody agrees with me. Um, but be that as it may, the market and as I appreciate you saying like you've recently shifted roles because that is a big topic now. Like Agile is gone as far as it can. Agile coaches don't have a lot of opportunities anymore. We need to shift roles, right? That's part of why I'm bringing this panel on next month. But are, from your perspective, do you think organizations are actually planning how roles are going to evolve? Like, let's say, for example, the BA is going to be using a bunch of AI tools. Obviously, that's going to change their job tremendously. Are they thinking that far ahead, or it's just let's use the AI BA and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it?
I I mean, I've read things from Meta where they've, I forget, laid off 50% of their developers or something crazy, or say 50% of their code is now written by it. So maybe companies like that, a lot of companies that I'm hearing about aren't necessarily there yet to change or evolve the roles. It's more of just how can we enhance these roles. One of the things that I've heard multiple times people get really excited about is they're like, I can use AI to take a business case and write up all of the requirements that I would need and then code those requirements and then test it and it can do it all for me. It's like, okay, like that's cool, but how does it know like what the business requirement is or what the users want or any of that sort of stuff? Like AI isn't a mind reader. And I think it also makes a lot of mistakes and it hallucinates. Klarna in the last year was a very early adopter and like partner of OpenAI, and they actually announced that they're hiring people again, and they realize that AI isn't ready yet for the type of level that these companies want to use it for. So I personally predict, and I've been wrong on my predictions because I thought NFTs and cryptocurrency was not a good investment, and I could have made millions. Um, but my prediction is in the next year or two, definitely within the next five, I think companies are going to say, why are we spending so much money on this? And I think we saw the same thing with big data. I think we saw the same thing with data lakes. And AI is a data-based technology where companies just don't have clean enough data to really leverage it well. And it's not something that people are super excited to spend money on. And so I think once the hype and as I mentioned, like the shareholder hype kind of dies down, I think companies are going to chill a little bit on it. And I think we'll start to see it emerge in places where it actually makes sense.
Yeah. And maybe that kind of segues to the final question I have for you here, and this has to do with something we talked about many weeks ago. If they decide, whoever they is, companies decide to get rid of all junior engineers because AI can do all of that work, what happens to the workforce when the senior engineers move companies or they retire and there's nobody moving up the ranks with learning that institutional knowledge? I mean, what are your thoughts around that? And have they changed since we talked? I don't know when that
Uh,
was, a couple months ago, maybe about that topic.
yeah, my stance hasn't changed. I do have concerns that if we're cutting the junior workforce, we're not going to have seniors. Um, eventually, unless AI is able to grow that fast. I also know a lot of companies that are cutting roles. It's similar to the digital revolution, where we're like, we're going to ship all of our industrial work overseas, and we're going to have everyone go to college. And millennials, went to college at a significantly higher rate, so much so that they start over profitizing that. But I see like similar things where it's like, oh, we don't need necessarily call center people, but now we need more AI engineers. And I think that's the thing that is kind of crazy to me is a team of AI engineers is a lot more expensive than a team of call center experts. And so there isn't really, I feel like, great thought when that, and AI is very expensive to run. The hardware you run it on is very expensive. And the thing that just kind of blows me away and is something I've spent the last few years in my public speaks talking about is if companies invested a fraction of what they're investing in AI into the people themselves, they would see a much larger return.
Mhm.
I've often joked and called human resources corporate resources because most of them, there are some really great HR people, so I don't want to overgeneralize, but a lot of companies use HR as a form of like control or administration, and leaders aren't trained. Most leaders are not trained on how to be a leader, period. And we don't really look at how do human beings function? How do they perform at their best? We are emotional, psychological creatures that science has shown certain scenarios we perform at our best. Some of those are things that Henry Ford 100 years ago implemented. Some of those are things that Dr. Deming has popularized, or Toyota really revolutionized the workforce um, by focusing on the human aspect. A lot of people associate TPS and lean with Toyota, but in the 50s, Toyota was going out of business. They needed a bailout from the Japanese government. And part of that deal is they had to send their leaders to Ford headquarters to learn how Ford built cars. And so many of the things that we attribute to Toyota actually comes from Ford. The difference was the psychological safety and some of their approaches to people and their approaches to learning and those sorts of things. And so they brought the soft skill element and they just, rolled over everyone around the world, like every automotive company. And so I think that's the thing with Agile, with even AI, is if we invest in people and we look at how do people perform at their best, our companies are going to become way more efficient and way more effective than just blindly investing in AI.
Absolutely. Well said. All right. Well, we have about 10 minutes left. So I thought let's open up to the audience. So if anybody wants to come off mute, make a comment, ask a question, feel free. Don't be shy.
I have a question. Hey, Patty.
Sure. Hey, Arlen.
Yeah. Real quick. So I think just kind of from a cultural standpoint, really, what forms of cultural resistance do you think that AI will face um, in going forward in this new day of age? Because I know with Agile, and I've worked with Agile for years, seeing the resistance kind of from waterfall when the company switched to Agile. What cultural resistance do you think that AI will face?
I think we're already seeing some of it, and it's the fear of investing in AI. So take my job. It kind of reminds me of the hero syndromes that we went through in Agile, where you had heroes in organizations that had all the information, all the knowledge, and the tribal knowledge and to do things, and they didn't want to work in a team because every time that they had to put out a fire, they were a hero, and they liked that feeling. They got that dopamine hit, and I think it's going to be the same with AI. And that is another point that I really want to hit on when we look at AI and its ability to adapt and adopt technologies, is that a lot of what we know is tribal knowledge. when it comes to how companies operate. AI can only imitate what is available on the internet or what your company feeds it. Google doesn't share openly how they scale like servers the way they scale them to be able to support massive loads. That's not something AI is going to be able to do for you. Same thing with like Netflix. They've been a little bit more open with some of their stuff, but not all of it. And I think about mainframes. Many Fortune 500 companies are still running on COBOL mainframes. There's no like, here's how you code a COBOL mainframe on the internet. So like, I would love to use AI for that, but there wasn't even like best practices applied a lot of times to those things. And so the cultural thing that I see is just not putting that tribal knowledge into AI and creating that dependency on those experts.
Gotcha. Okay.
I will say that from an adoption standpoint, I think anytime you ask someone to do something different, you have to develop new habits and there's resistance. I think where AI is going to really excel is just enhancing the things we're already doing. Like Google search. I already search in Google. Now I have Gemini pop up. Is Gemini always right? No. So there's improvements there. But I didn't have to change anything to suddenly use AI. And I think I could see the same thing like in IDEs, when developers are coding, it already pops up for them. Like you hit tab or enter space and it fills in for you the rest of the function. I could see as tools do that, or Photoshop, you highlight it and it's like, hey, gender, like we already did like awareness, content aware fill, and those sorts of things. Just enhancing those metrics, I think, is a great place for it. I think is where we're going to really see AI adoption shine.
Okay. That was good. Good.
Thank you, Arlen. Anybody else have a question or a comment even?
I guess something I'm thinking through is, okay, so when you think about a new, I don't know, I'm going to say project, new endeavor, you think to the past, you think about lessons learned, you think about, and I'm thinking on this more is that, okay, so in many cases, it's not uncommon for us to see leaders push something that's becoming more popular, hence AI or Agile, and they coin it and say, "Hey, we're doing this." Okay, that's fine, but the issue is that I'm hearing is how can we learn from what was applied to things previously to improve, whether it be adoption, whether it be use, understanding. In many cases, I'm seeing not just in the company I work for, but software engineering managers or directors are saying, yeah, our workforce is going to get cut. Do they truly know that? Do they truly understand what their developers do? Do they truly understand the code base? In many cases, at least from what I'm seeing, it's not just one programming language that some of these applications or multiple applications are utilizing these days. So it's kind of one of those things that it's hard to say. And of course, I'm challenging a lot of at least the teammates I work with, use AI on your personal computer. Just see what it pulls up. Maybe that might help you resolve something faster. And then it's a good use case of, hey, I was able to fix this or figure this out 2 times faster in a day, 2 days, whereas that would have been, several weeks. So I've actually seen that already. So I think we're trying to educate leaders and what we're finding as a result of using AI in some way, shape, or form. So I think that's the hardest part, is the educational gap I'm sensing. And
Yeah.
how do you beat that? And it's kind of like there's not a that's going to take obviously a lot of time and energy.
Absolutely. And, that's why I mentioned before change management, because it's not like you just do a training This is kind of like where Agile fell apart, right? You just do this 3 hour training and like everybody's good, we're Agile, just do it. But if you really want things to change, there have to be people out there like champions, for example, working boots on the ground with people every single day to help them change their behavior. Because if you've been a Scrum Master, you've been an Agile coach, that is what's required in order to help people change their behavior because it's hardwired. So that's why previously when I said, I think this is going to take a lot longer than the technology is evolving, right? There's a lot of hype out there, but based on change management efforts in the past, it's taken so long. Why do we think it's going to be any different this time? And I don't know that answer, but like I know human beings, and it just seems to me like I don't think this is going to be that fast. And companies
Yeah,
have to do a really good job at this change management piece, the education piece, the upskilling and reskilling piece. And are they willing to do that? Like Brad, you were talking about investing in the people. Are they willing to put the money there or not?
yeah, I would second
So,
that.
and like in Agile, like I said, our mistake was not our, I mean, like as a community, I don't take responsibility for this, but like we did the 3 hour training and then it's like, okay, that's all we have time for. So how much changed? So I don't know if you want to add on to that, Brad, but that was my soapbox.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to go as smoothly as some companies are optimistically hoping for. Larry Apke talks about how in the early 1900s they had chief electrical officers to for organizations newly adopting electricity. They didn't know how to apply electricity to their tooling or their products or any of that. And so they had a C-suite person whose job it was to build a team and to look at strategically where do we apply electricity within our organization. And Larry's argument is if we want to be successful with Agile, we need a chief Agile officer, which I think is a great point. But I also see the same with AI, and I am seeing higher up roles, AI roles in organizations, maybe not like chief AI officer, but I'm seeing senior VPs, like one down from C-suite, depending on the titles in your organizations. And so I think if companies have dedicated roles to look at AI in general and how do we apply it to our organization in a secure and effective way, I could see that being the most effective path forward if I look at history. And I think AI is amazing. I do want to say that. I don't think I've said that yet. I think AI is truly remarkable. It's truly great at comparing things. But the other thing that I think we need to call out is we still don't understand how AI works. And AI openly lies time and again. If you ask it, how did you do that? It will tell you a different answer than when they've actually like networked to see what it did. And so I do think that there's a huge security risk in technology we don't understand. And so I think it's very important to have AI experts at your organization as we learn more about it and how it functions.
Yep. Well, with that, Brad, we are at time. Thank you so much for coming here today, for having this conversation, for sharing your knowledge. I appreciate it. I know everybody on the call appreciates it, and whoever watches the video will appreciate it. Where can we find you to reach out to you if we have questions or want to connect?
Yes. Well, thank you for having me. This has been fun. Bradleyn.com is my site, and LinkedIn /in/Bradgile, Bradgile, are kind of the two places you can find me.
Okay, wonderful. Well, again, thank you so much. This was great. I will clean up the recording. I'm going to email it out to everybody next week. And I look forward to chatting with you again sometime in the future. We always have great conversations.
Definitely.
So enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and I'll see everybody else around.
Thank you. Thanks, Patty. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.